People often say dogs bark for 3 reasons: fear, danger, or affection. But that Tuesday, at Pine Ridge Elementary, Bruno the school's cherished K9 let out a bark that sounded like it could tear through steel. It happened at exactly 12:07 p.m. in a quiet corner of the cafeteria where the loners typically ate. The usual lunchroom noise buzzed around. Trays squeaking, 4th graders laughing shrilly, and the steady hum of overhead lights. But Bruno wasn't paying attention to any of that. His eyes were locked on a single lunchbox, and he refused to look away. He lunged forward with such force that Officer Daniels nearly lost grip of his coffee. The sound that came from Bruno wasn't angry, it was raw, instinctive, almost like a signal that something terrible was about to happen. Conversations stopped. A teacher froze mid-bite. One student shrieked. Still, Bruno barked, and the clock kept ticking. This wasn't just any dog. Bruno was a trained detection canine with 5 years of experience, sniffing out everything from narcotics to trace chemicals. He had once helped break a fentanyl smuggling ring in El Paso. Now he wore a service vest and a badge that read, Canine School Resource Unit, and he never barked without reason. Officer Daniels, a former Marine with a steady hand and a calm demeanor, crouched beside him. Easy boy, what is it? He murmured. Bruno didn't flinch. His gaze remained fixed on a red and blue Spider-Man lunchbox resting at the edge of a cafeteria table, slightly scratched and untouched. Sitting beside it was Liam Carter, pale, quiet 10-year-old who usually kept to himself. His face turned pink as he looked around in confusion. That's mine, he said quietly. Why is your dog acting like that? Daniels shifted his eyes from the boy to the box. You're sure? My mum made it, Liam replied. Same as always, PB&J, goldfish, and a juice box. Bruno growled louder. Some people assumed it had to be a mistake. Dogs have off days, right? Maybe he caught a strange scent, nothing dangerous. But then Bruno bit down on the lunchbox, not to destroy it, just firmly enough to yank it off the table and hold it between his paws. He barked again, this time sharper, urgent. Panic flickered through Daniels. He stood up fast. Clear the room now. Teachers began moving students toward the exits. One child asked, teary-eyed, are we gonna blow up? Daniels didn't reply because he didn't know. Unless. Then 2 minutes, the cafeteria was empty. Liam remained frozen until a counselor gently took his hand. Bruno stayed put, tense, fur bristling, nostrils flaring. Never taking his eyes off the lunchbox. Daniels pulled out his phone. Possible chemical hazard in the cafeteria. Request hazmat team and chemical detection unit. K9 shows strong reaction. Might be food related. Send medical backup as precaution. He returned to Bruno's side. You did good, he whispered. Stay with me. Looking closely at the lunchbox, Daniels didn't see anything obviously wrong. No wires, no strange odors, no signs of tampering. But one detail made him pause. The box was cold. Too cold. It hadn't been in a fridge. It came from Liam's backpack. That didn't make sense. Bruno, trained to recognize over a dozen hazardous compounds, trembled not from fear, but from intense concentration. By the time hazmat arrived, the entire school was in lockdown. Liam's mother had been contacted and was on her way. The cafeteria was sealed, ventilated, and scanned. Outside, Bruno lay in the grass next to Daniels, panting softly but never shifting his gaze from the building. 10 minutes later, Liam's mother, Jessica Carter, arrived, frantic and out of breath. She rushed to the principal, visibly panicked. I don't understand, she cried. I didn't pack him lunch today. Everyone froze. What? Daniels asked, stepping forward. I overslept, gave him lunch money, told him to buy something. From the cafeteria, a heavy silence followed. Daniels turned to look back at the red and blue lunchbox, still sealed, untouched on the table inside. A quiet question no one wanted to answer. Outside, the school grounds were still eerily still. For a Tuesday, students had been moved to the gym. Teachers stood in small groups, whispering, eyes drifting toward the main building. Bruno lay motionless in the grass, Ears perked, tail still, watching. Waiting. Daniels stood nearby, arms crossed, staring through the cafeteria's reinforced windows. His stomach knotted. That lunchbox had arrived with a 10-year-old boy and now it was being handled like a potential explosive. Inside, the hazmat team from the sheriff's department worked carefully. One member, Kate Monroe, used tongs to slowly open the container. Her gloved hands moved with surgical precision. A second tech monitored chemical readings. Daniels couldn't hear them from outside, but he read their expressions. Confusion, then surprise, then rising concern. Kate backed away and said something quickly to her partner. They sealed the lunchbox in a transparent case and moved it out the back door, toward their mobile lab. The principal started to follow, but Daniels stopped him with a raised hand. Let them handle it. The principal nodded, sweat forming on his forehead. Daniels returned to Bruno, who stood and nudged his leg, still watching the cafeteria doors. You all right, boy? He asked. Bruno gave a low grunt, focused. Alert. Jessica Carter stepped outside. Again, mid-30s, single mum, worked double shifts at the town grocery store. She looked exhausted and shaken, eyes red, hair frizzy with stress. I swear, she said, voice trembling. I didn't give him that. He must have picked it up from somewhere, maybe the bench. I thought maybe a teacher gave it to him. He said it was his. Daniels crouched down to meet her eye. Jessica, listen. Did he have anything else with him this morning? She shook her head. Just his backpack. I packed a water bottle and his hoodie. That's it. No lunchbox. Daniels nodded slowly, the weight of her words settling in. And there's no one at home who might have left it for him. Could someone else have left it for him? An uncle? A neighbor? Daniels asked. Jessica's face fell. No, it's just me and Liam. By this time, Liam was curled up on the cot in the nurse's office, wrapped in a thin school-issued blanket, legs swinging gently. A counselor sat beside him, offering juice and calm, quiet questions. Do you remember who gave you that lunch, Liam? He shook his head. It was already on the table. But you thought it was yours? He hesitated. I don't know. It looked cool. I never had a Spider-Man lunchbox. The counselor glanced at the nurse. That single sentence revealed a lot. Liam had wanted it to be his maybe. Convinced himself it was because pretending was easier than admitting he'd never had one. Meanwhile, in the parking lot, the county's mobile chemical lab had begun processing the initial samples. Daniel stood beside the technician, eyes locked on the data scrolling across the screen. Kate Monroe approached, peeling off her gloves and letting out a breath. It's confirmed, she said. Daniels turned to her. What is it? Valium. Nitrate, she replied. Daniels blinked. That's industrial grade. She nodded grimly. It's used in rodenticides. Dangerous even in small amounts. No smell, no taste. You'd never know it was there. Daniel's mind raced. Enough to kill a child, easily, Kate said. If he'd eaten that sandwich, he would have been in a coma within the hour. Dead before morning. A heavy silence followed. Daniels exhaled and muttered, Bruno, you magnificent dog. The state investigator was called in that evening. So far, no reporters had gotten wind of the situation, and Daniels hoped it would stay that way a bit longer. Still, the school district had already begun preparing a carefully worded press release. Something vague and calm. Hazardous substance. Identified and safely contained with assistance from our trained K9. No mention of how narrowly they'd avoided tragedy. Daniels didn't leave the school until nearly 8 p.m. Bruno rode shotgun. His nose pressed against the window, eyes alert. As ever, before heading home, Daniels stopped by the park. Bruno wandered over to the trees, did his business, and came back to sit quietly beside his partner on a bench. They sat in silence for a while. Daniels finally pulled a small dog treat from his coat pocket. You've never broken protocol. Day in your life, he said softly, holding out the treat. Until today. Bruno took it gently, chewing slowly, like it meant something. Daniels rubbed his head. I'm glad you did, partner. The following morning, Pine Ridge Elementary reopened, but only partially. Some students returned for limited classes. Others stayed home. The cafeteria remained closed. Jello caution. Tape stretched across the entrances. Janitors murmuring quiet apologies. But the mystery had only deepened. Overnight, the school's security footage had been pulled and reviewed. Daniels sat in a small, dim conference room with the school's IT director and the resource officer. A laptop screen glowed as grainy video played. Time-stamp. 11:53 a.m. The cafeteria was mostly empty. A small figure entered from a side hallway. The video quality was poor, but the person was clearly a student. Hoodie pulled low, backpack hanging off one shoulder. The figure walked quickly to a table in the back, placed the Spider-Man lunchbox down, and left just as quickly. No staff had seen it happen. No cameras had captured the face. "Can you sharpen that?" Daniels asked. The IT tech tried. He zoomed. In adjusted brightness, contrast, still too blurry. Still no way to identify the kid. That's when Daniels started thinking deeper. Who brings poisoned food into a school and leaves it for someone else to find? A cruel prank, a disturbed kid, or something worse? There were no answers, only a gnawing feeling that whatever it wasn't random. Later that day, Daniels visited Jessica and Liam at their small apartment. Jessica looked completely drained. Liam was quiet, withdrawn, but when he saw Bruno at the door, his eyes lit up. "Can he come in?" he asked. "Of course," Daniels replied. Unclipping the leash, Bruno trotted inside and laid himself beside Liam on the couch. Resting his head on the boy's knee, Liam didn't speak for a while. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "I didn't know it was poison. I just thought it was a good day." Daniels nodded slowly. "Sometimes, bad people make it look that way, buddy." Liam looked up at him. "Do you think someone tried to hurt me?" Daniels didn't answer, because honestly, he didn't know. The halls of Pine Ridge Elementary had never felt so still. Even with half the students back in classrooms and the others learning from home, a quiet unease lingered like a chill that refused to lift. Teachers kept their voices low behind closed doors. Parents flooded the front office with calls, and Liam Carter hadn't returned to school. The red and blue lunchbox was now sealed and catalogued in an evidence locker 3 towns over, handled like a weapon. But the biggest questions remained unanswered. How did it get there? And more disturbingly, why? Officer Daniels sat alone in the teacher's lounge, sipping lukewarm coffee, staring at the wall. Beneath the table, Bruno snoozed lightly, ears twitching now and then. Neither of them was ready to stop watching. Not yet. The dog had finally settled, his tail tucked beneath him and his paws twitching gently as dreams took hold. Even heroes need their rest. Daniel stood in front of the bulletin board next to the refrigerator, eyes scanning over flyers, schedules, and a birthday list. One paper, printed in bold red letters, warned, "Do not leave unlabeled food in the staff fridge." He gave a dry shake of his head and muttered under his breath, "Might as well add, don't poison the kids to that." That's when a voice spoke behind him. "I think I recognize that scent." Daniels turned to see Miss Halverson, the science teacher, framed in the doorway. She was in her early 60s, silver hair pinned back neatly, still wearing her lab coat despite the day being over. She looked worn but sharply attentive. He stood. "Ms. Halverson, you said the smell seemed familiar." She nodded and stepped closer. "I heard it was thallium nitrate. They confirmed it yesterday. The county tested it twice." Her expression grew tense. "We had an incident about a year ago. It was during an advanced chemistry elective for the older students." Daniels arched a brow. "You're telling me thallium nitrate was actually kept on campus?" "Not anymore," she said quickly. "We followed protocol after the spill. Everything was properly disposed of, but a few vials disappeared before inventory. We reported it. They said it was likely a labeling mistake." He leaned forward slightly. "Do you remember who was enrolled in that class?" She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them slowly, saying a name that sent a jolt down Daniels's spine. Brady Miles. Brady, 12 years old, was the kind of kid who seemed to know too much for someone his age. He carried a chip on his shoulder the size of the state of Texas, and the intelligence to turn dangerous. His older brother Jeremy had been expelled the previous year for selling prescription drugs. Word was, he blamed a teacher at Pine Ridge for tipping off the authorities. Brady's sharp, Halverson said. Too sharp. I once caught him mixing chemicals without permission. When I confronted him, he claimed it was just for an experiment. Daniels frowned. Has he had any run-ins with Liam? She hesitated. Not that I've seen, but he doesn't get along well with authority. By the time Daniels tracked Brady down, the kid was hunched in a library chair, headphones in, posture low and guarded. The librarian gave Daniels a look that silently begged, "Take him." Daniels walked up and slid into the chair across from him. Brady didn't even glance up. "I in trouble again?" the boy asked. Daniels folded his hands. "Should you be?" Brady yanked off his headphones and scoffed. "I didn't bring a bomb to school, if that's what this is about. No one mentioned bombs." Brady's smirk faltered for a second. Daniels leaned closer. "We've got footage. Someone with your height, your build, wearing a hoodie, and we're running prints on the box. Want to say anything before those results come in?" Silence. Then Brady mumbled, "It wasn't meant for that kid." The words hit like a gut punch. "Come again?" Daniels asked, keeping his voice even. Brady leaned back, arms crossed, jaw clenched. It wasn't for him, that loner kid. He probably thought it was just a free lunch. Then, who was it meant for? Brady. A long pause. His lips pressed together tightly. "Mr. Dalton." Daniels blinked. "Dalton, the substitute." Brady nodded. "He's the one who called the cops on Jeremy, got him expelled. My brothers. Life went off the rails after that, and now that guy just walks in here like he's some kind of hero. So your solution was to kill him?" Brady shrugged, his voice cracking. "I didn't mean for anyone to die, just get sick. Scared." Daniels stared at him. The kid clearly had no grasp of just how lethal the chemical was. No idea. Daniels thought grimly. He'd nearly killed a classmate with a sandwich and juice box. You put poison in food and left it out for a teacher. Daniels said coldly. "That's not a prank. That's a serious crime." Brady looked down. Silent. Back at the station, Daniels sat in the report room, reviewing everything. The lunchbox hadn't belonged to Liam. It had been placed there, intended for someone else. Brady had confessed, but there was no sign of regret. If not for Bruno, the outcome could have been tragic. Daniels shut his laptop and rubbed his eyes. What lingered in his mind wasn't Brady's face, or even the confession. It was the terrifying possibility that no one might have ever known the truth. If Bruno hadn't barked, if Liam had eaten the sandwich, it would have looked like a sudden, allergic reaction. Maybe not even suspicious. By the time they pieced it together, Liam could have been buried, and the trail long gone cold. That evening, Daniels made one last stop before heading home. He pulled up to Jessica Carter's apartment, just after the sun dipped below the trees. The porch light flickered. She answered the door in a hoodie, eyes heavy with fatigue. "Can I help you?" He nodded toward the cruiser, where Bruno waited patiently. "Mind if we come in?" Inside, Liam was at the kitchen table drawing dinosaurs. He lit up the moment he saw Bruno, who padded over and gently rested his head on the boy's lap. Daniels exhaled deeply. "I wanted you both to know, we figured out what happened." Jessica's hands trembled slightly as she poured coffee. "You did," he explained everything. "Brady, the poison, the intended target, the mistake." She listened silently, one hand resting protectively on Liam's shoulder. Barely above a whisper, she said, "He could have died, and we might never have known why." Daniels nodded, but Bruno did. That night, Bruno curled up beside Daniels's bed, his head resting on an old towel that still smelled faintly of school floors and cafeteria pizza. Daniels stared at the ceiling, thoughts spinning. This case had become more than just another investigation. It was a stark reminder that heroes don't always wear badges or carry weapons. Sometimes, The ones who save lives walk on 4 legs and speak through action, not words. Sometimes, all it takes to change a child's fate is a bark. By morning, a brisk autumn wind carried golden leaves across the sidewalk as Daniels stepped back onto Pine Ridge Elementary's grounds. The air felt still but heavy, like the walls themselves remembered what had happened. He adjusted his jacket as he made his way up the steps, Bruno trotting beside him, calm and watchful as ever. That day, Daniels wasn't just a school resource officer. He came to finish what Bruno had started. Inside, the school secretary handed him a warm cup of coffee to creams, no sugar. She didn't say much, just gave a small nod and returned to sorting through the morning attendance slips. Word had spread. Bruno had saved a life. No one yet realized just how far this went in the IT room. Daniels met up with the district's forensic tech, a wiry guy who looked like he hadn't slept properly since the late 90s. Curtis was hunched over the playback terminal, red-eyed, and scrolling through surveillance footage frame by frame. "Morning, Curtis," Daniels said, setting a cup of coffee down beside him. Curtis gave a tired grunt. "Found something?" Daniels pulled up a chair next to him. Bruno settled at their feet, calm and watchful as ever. On the monitor, footage from 2 days ago began to play. Monday, Las 11:53 m. The cafeteria was mostly empty, just a few custodians and a janitor in the background. Then, a figure entered through the side door. Small frame, hoodie pulled low. The person moved with quick, deliberate steps. As if checking their surroundings carefully, they made their way to a bench along the back wall, the same one Liam sat at almost every day, and placed a red and blue Spider-Man lunchbox on it. Then, they turned and left. No hesitation. "You still think that's Brady?" Curtis asked. Daniels watched closely. "Maybe, but something feels off." He rewound the footage and enhanced it, adjusting the contrast. The movements didn't match Brady's usual swagger. The steps were more methodical, slower, more confident. "Brady's got attitude," Daniels said. "But this isn't how he moves." Curtis switched to another camera angle. "That's not all." He pulled up hallway footage from earlier that morning. Same hoodie, same build. This time, the person lingered near the staff lounge, peeking inside, then backing away. "Why would a kid be snooping around the teacher's fridge?" Curtis asked Daniels. Rubbed his chin, thinking, maybe to see where Dalton eats, or to check if the setup would work. Curtis shrugged. But Brady said he left the lunch for Dalton on a bench. Daniels stared at the screen, a realization forming. If the plan was to target a teacher, why not just use the staff fridge? Then it hit him. What if the real target wasn't Dalton? What if Brady had lied? Later that day, Daniels returned to see Ms. Halverson, the science teacher who had first recognized the chemical compound. She greeted him in the hallway with a furrowed brow, her gray lab coat still on, chalk dust smeared on one sleeve. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday," she said as they walked. "About Brady, about the thallium." Daniels nodded. "I need to see last year's class list. The elective chemistry group." She pulled a folder from her desk drawer and handed it over. "Here, fall semester." Daniels flipped through the names, stopping at one. Kayla Owens. She was quiet. Always wore oversized sweaters. Smart, but kept to herself. He remembered her once collapsing during a fire drill, not from smoke, but from anxiety. Did she ever cause trouble? Daniels asked. Halverson frowned. "Not that I recall, but she was close to Jeremy Miles." Daniels looked up. "Brady's brother." She nodded. They dated for a while. Some said she was more into it than he was. After the expulsion, she kind of disappeared into herself. Daniels found Kayla in the art room. Class had just ended, and students were packing up. She stayed behind, painting quietly, her fingers stained with blue and gold. Daniels approached. Gently, Bruno waited by the door. "Hey Kayla," he said, keeping his tone soft. "Can we talk for a minute?" She looked up, startled. "Am I in trouble?" "No, not at all. Just need to ask a few questions." They sat facing each other. The late afternoon sun filtered through the high windows, casting a warm glow over her canvas, a painting of a lunch table, empty, except for a vivid red and blue lunchbox placed at the center. Daniels studied it. That's an interesting piece. What inspired it? She shrugged. Just came to me. He kept his voice level. Kayla, we've been reviewing the footage, and something doesn't add up with Brady's story. I think you know what I mean. She looked away, her expression crumbling. You were there, he said gently. You left the lunchbox. Tears welled in her eyes. He said it would help. That no one would get hurt. Brady told you that. She nodded slowly. He said Mr. Dalton destroyed his family. That if the lunch ended up with a teacher, it would send a message. Her voice broke, but Liam took it. I didn't know, I swear, I did what he said. I didn't think anyone would actually eat it. Daniels let out a slow breath, heart heavy. This wasn't just about someone breaking the rules, it was about a kid being manipulated into something terrible by someone she trusted or thought she did. That night, Daniels filed 2 reports. One was addressed to the district attorney's office. It recommended criminal charges against Brady, Miles for attempted poisoning, and conspiracy to harm on school grounds. One of the documents had been for the school boarder. Formal request for full-time mental health support at Pine Ridge Elementary. Daniels had finished it just after midnight. Bruno lay nearby on his dog bed, softly snoring, his tail flicking now and then like he was chasing something in a dream. Daniels glanced over at him. You were right again, partner. The next day, the principal called an emergency staff meeting. Parents were notified. The district drafted statements. Rumors spread quickly, but the full story, quiet, intricate, and unsettling, remained tightly controlled. And at the center of it all, Bruno received a new tag for his collar. It read, Guardian, Hero, Bruno. Not that Bruno cared about titles. What mattered to him was Liam. When Liam finally returned to school, that Friday, nervous clutching his backpack, Bruno stepped away from Daniels and walked straight to the boy. He sat down in front of him, tail wagging. Liam knelt down and wrapped his arms around the dog's neck. I missed you too, he whispered. Outside. The trees around Pine Ridge Elementary had begun turning flashes of gold and rust, dancing on the wind in the crisp October air. But inside, a heavier atmosphere hung in the halls, like the grey skies of fall. Liam sat in the counselor's office, legs swinging beneath an old wooden chair. One hand held a juice box, the other a crumpled tissue. Bruno lay at his feet, completely still, eyes open and watchful. He hadn't left Liam's side once since the boy came back, and no one tried to stop him. Further down the hallway, Officer Daniels stood in the faculty lounge with Principal Harrington and Ms. Alvarez, the school counselor. They all looked worn out. We've confirmed it was Kayla Owens who placed the lunchbox, Daniels said, flipping through his notes. She's cooperating. She didn't make it, didn't buy the chemicals, didn't plan anything. What about Brady? The principal asked. Daniels nodded grimly. He was behind all of it. Ms. Alvarez looked stunned. He's 12. This isn't a prank or a food fight. He was trying to poison someone. Daniels added, worse. He was willing to let someone else take the blame if it went wrong. It was true Brady had been manipulating both sides from the start. After his older brother, Jeremy, got expelled for selling pills at school, Brady had gone quiet. Not angry, not explosive, just cold, calculated. What Daniels hadn't realized until now was that the substitute teacher Brady had accused, Mr. Dalton, hadn't actually reported Jeremy had been Ms. Halverson, the science teacher. She'd filed a confidential report after catching Jeremy sneaking into the chemical cabinet unsupervised, but told no one, except the administration. Brady assumed Dalton had turned in his brother. Dalton was new. He looked like the type who followed rules. It was easier to blame someone unfamiliar. Daniels pulled out the year-old report, complete with timestamp and signature. He picked the wrong guy, Daniels muttered, and nearly killed a kid. That afternoon, Daniels visited the Miles household without Bruno this time. Some things needed to be done alone. The house sat on the edge of town, just past the tracks. The paint on the porch was peeling, the lawn overgrown, the screen door hanging loose. Brady's mother opened the door, cigarette in hand, dark circles under her eyes. Again, she muttered. "What now?" Daniels kept it professional. "Ma'am, I need to speak with Brady. He's grounded. This isn't about a curfew." She stepped aside. Brady sat at the kitchen table, hands folded in his lap, eyes on the floor. Daniels took the seat across from him. "You lied to me," he said. Brady shrugged. "What else is new? You told me Dalton turned in your brother." "That wasn't true." Brady paused. "Doesn't matter." "It does matter. You tried to poison someone, and you nearly killed Liam Carter." He waited for a reaction. "You remember him, the quiet kid, the one who never talked back. The same kid your friends used to mock for wearing the same hoodie every day." Brady stayed silent. Daniels leaned in, his tone low and steady. "Do you even understand what would have happened if Bruno hadn't barked? You think Liam would have just gotten a little sick and gone home early? Thallium doesn't work like that. It doesn't offer second chances." Still no response. Daniels placed a photo on the table. A printed lab report, high toxicity, lethal dose. Underneath it, Liam's school picture. Brady stared at it for a moment, then asked quietly, "Is he okay?" Daniels nodded. "Because of Bruno, not because of you." Brady looked down, not in guilt, but in surrender. That night, Daniels sat by the fire with Bruno curled beside him. He stared at the flames, Brady's words still echoing in his mind. It doesn't matter, but it did matter. Intention mattered. Truth mattered. And what someone chooses to do when no one else is watching, that's what mattered most. He thought about Liam, how close they had come to tragedy. How the truth had revealed itself, layer by layer, like a trap, set and forgotten. Daniels sipped cold coffee and scratched behind Bruno's ear. "You saved that boy," he whispered. "You didn't just bark, you knew." Bruno let out a soft whine and rested his head on Daniels's foot. The next morning, at school, something remarkable happened. Liam stood in front of his fourth-grade class and gave a short presentation about canine dogs and scent detection. His hands shook, his voice wavered, but he made it through. When he finished, he looked down at Bruno, proudly seated beside Officer Daniels, and smiled. "He's not just a dog," Liam said. "He's the reason I'm still here." Silence filled the room until one student clapped, then another. Soon, the entire class was on their feet, applauding, not because they fully understood the danger, or because it felt dramatic, but because they knew something serious had happened and a dog had made it right. In the staff room, Ms. Alvarez wiped at her eyes. Principal Harrington gave a small nod. Daniels looked around and felt a tightness in his chest, not fear, not sorrow, pride, and something else, responsibility. The crisis had passed, but the damage left behind would take time to mend. The school board arranged meetings with both Liam's and Brady's families. Mental health professionals were brought in. Kayla was enrolled in a supervised youth support program. Brady was placed in juvenile detention, awaiting formal charges, and Bruno, the kids gave him a new nickname, Lunchbox Bruno. Daniels wasn't sure how the dog felt about it, but Bruno wagged his tail every time he heard it. So maybe he didn't mind at all. That night, Daniels knelt by his bed, looking at Bruno with quiet reflection. "There will always be darkness in the world," he said softly. "But if we can stop it, just once, it makes all the difference." He rubbed under Bruno's chin. "And we did it, partner. You did." Bruno leaned into his chestnut. A thank you, but a vow. 2 years later, the new principal of Pine Ridge Elementary stood before the gathered students in the newly repainted gymnasium. In one hand, she held a brass plaque. In the other, a folded American flag. "Before we begin our Thanksgiving break," she announced, "there's one more thing we'd like to share. Some of you were here 2 years ago. Some of you remember the dog who saved a student's life in this very cafeteria. His name was Bruno." The gym fell silent, the mood respectful. "Although Bruno is no longer with us," she continued, "his impact, his bravery, and the lives he touched remain. Today, We dedicate a space in his honor, the reading corner of our new library. Polite applause followed. A few teachers dabbed their eyes. Standing quietly at the back of the room, wearing a navy blue cadet uniform, was Officer Liam Carter. He was 12 now, standing straight, his hand placed firmly over his heart. Bruno had passed away 6 months earlier peacefully, at home, curled beside Officer Daniels, who had retired that same week. The department had offered to reassign Bruno to a new handler, but Daniels declined. "He finishes with me," he'd said. "That dog didn't just save lives, he saved mine." Bruno had lived a long, full life. 9 years of service, 6 official honors, dozens of successful searches, and one life-saving bark that changed a school's story forever. When he died, the entire town came to say goodbye. Children brought drawings, parents laid flowers, the mayor gave a speech. But Liam said the most, using the fewest words. At the front of the church, he'd stepped up and whispered, "He saw me when no one else did." Now, in the updated Pine Ridge Library, a small bronze statue of Bruno stood in a cozy nook surrounded by beanbags and shelves of children's books. The plaque beneath the sculpture read, "To Bruno, who sensed the danger before anyone else did." Below that was a quote from Officer Daniels. "Justice doesn't always make noise. Sometimes it walks on 4 legs and waits for you to notice." After retiring, Daniels moved to a quiet home just outside town, an old farmhouse with a wide porch and a sweeping view of the valley. He still visited the elementary school once a month, mostly to check in on Liam. Their conversations were different now, less like a boy and a police officer, more like 2 people bound by a memory only they truly understood. Sometimes they'd sit side by side on the porch, sipping hot chocolate. "You ever think about it?" Liam asked one evening, kicking his boots against the wooden rail. Daniels gave a quiet nod. "Every time I hear a dog bark, and I can't explain why." They both smiled. Liam had changed. He stood taller now, spoke with more confidence. He no longer hid behind oversized hoodies, he had made friends. He'd joined the Junior K9 program. And he had begun training his own dogger, headstrong black lab named River. "She's not Bruno," Liam had admitted once. Daniels rested a firm hand on his shoulder. "She doesn't need to be. Bruno already did his job. Now, it's your turn." Brady Miles had been sent to a juvenile facility in another county. The courts handled everything quietly but firmly: restorative justice, therapy, and a year of supervised rehabilitation. As part of a school outreach program, Ms. Alvarez visited him once. "He still won't talk about what happened," she told Daniels later. "But he listens now, and that's something." Kayla Owens transferred to a different school district. With consistent support from mental health professionals, she began to reintegrate into student life. The art teacher mentioned she still painted red and blue lunchboxes, never the same design, but always closed. Back at Pine Ridge Elementary, the school became known for its focus on prevention and support. A full-time counselor was hired. A mental health resource room was established. And every autumn, they hosted Canine Hero Day, where officers and their dogs came to the gym for demonstrations, meet and greets, and safety presentations. At the most recent event, Liam gave a speech. He stood before 200 younger students, dressed neatly in his cadet uniform. His hands shook slightly, but his voice carried. "My name is Liam Carter," he said, "and I'm here because of a dog who didn't just protect people, he understood them." He paused, took a breath. "Some of you don't know what it's like to feel invisible, but I did. Bruno didn't just bark at a lunchbox, he barked for me, and because of that, I got to grow up." The gym was completely still. Then the applause began, soft at first, then spreading like ripples across water. Above the podium hung a photo of Bruno in a black walnut frame. He wasn't posing. Dogs don't do that. But there was something in his look that said he knew his job was done. That evening, Daniels sat on his porch as the last orange streaks of sunset faded into night. The wind stirred the leaves, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called out into the dark. He sipped his coffee, glancing down at the empty spot where Bruno used to lie. But now, it wasn't empty. River Liam's new partner in training had taken to sleeping there during weekend visits. She looked up at Daniels. With calm, focused eyes, a different dog, but the same heartbeat. "You've got big paws to fill, girl," he said quietly. River wagged her tail once, and rested her head on the porch rail. Sometimes, all it takes is a single momenta sound, a bark that no one sees coming, and everything changes, not because it's loud, but because it comes from the one who sees what no one else does.